This was a tragic life that football tried to forget. John Charles was supposed to be the gentle giant who had it all, the perfect player, the perfect gentleman, the perfect career. But what they never told you was how it all ended. The truth behind his final years is something the football world kept quiet about. This is the real story of how Britain's greatest ever footballer went from glory at Juventus to a hospital bed with his foot cut off. How does someone go from being Serie A's top scorer to fighting gangrene in a Yorkshire hospital? How does the man who never got booked in his entire career end up forgotten and alone? Let's go back to where it all began. William John Charles was born on December 27, 1931, in Swansea, Wales. Football was in his blood from day one. He started at his hometown club before making the move that would change everything, signing for Leeds United in 1948 at just 17 years old. But Charles wasn't your typical footballer. He was massive, 6 foot 2 inches of pure muscle and skill. What made him special wasn't just his size, though. He could play anywhere on the pitch and dominate completely. Defender? No problem. Striker? Even better. The man was unstoppable. After his national service ended in 1952, Leeds moved him up front permanently. The results were incredible. Charles became the second division's top scorer in 1954. When they made him captain, he led Leeds straight to promotion. This wasn't luck, this was pure class. But the really amazing thing about Charles, he never got a booking. Not one yellow card in his entire career. Never sent off, never hurt another player on purpose. In an era when football was rough and dirty, Charles played like a gentleman. That's how he got the nickname that would stick forever, the Gentle Giant. In 1957, everything changed. Juventus came calling with an offer that shocked the football world. £65,000. That was a world record transfer fee. To put that in perspective, that's like paying £50 million today. Leeds had no choice but to sell. Charles arrived in Turin and immediately became a legend. Italian football had never seen anything like him. In 5 seasons, he scored 93 goals in 155 games. Think about that. A goal every other game while playing in the toughest league in the world. The trophies came flooding in. 3 Serie A titles, 2 Coppa Italia wins. In the 1957-58 season, he was Serie A's top goal scorer. The Italian fans didn't just respect him, they worshipped him. Here was this Welsh giant who could score headers, strike from distance, and create chances for everyone else. On the international stage, Charles was just as dominant. 38 caps for Wales, 15 goals, and he helped them reach their first ever World Cup in 1958. An injury stopped him from playing in the quarterfinal against Brazil, but by then he'd already made history. The numbers tell the story, but they don't tell you about the respect he earned. Charles played football the right way. No dirty tackles, no arguing with referees, no cheating. In Italy, where football is taken deadly seriously, they called him Il Gigante Buono, the good giant. But success abroad came with a price. Charles's wife was homesick. She missed Wales, missed family, missed home. So in 1962, Charles made the decision that would change everything. He came back to Leeds. This should have been a fairy tale homecoming, the local hero returning to lead his boyhood club to glory. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. Charles was 31 now, and football had moved on. The training was different under Don Revie. The pace was faster, the game had changed, and Charles struggled to keep up. He only played 11 games for Leeds in his second spell. 11 games. The man who had conquered Italy couldn't get in the Leeds team anymore. It was heartbreaking to watch. Desperate to prove himself, Charles went back to Italy, this time to Roma. But it was the same story. Just 10 appearances before injuries and arguments with the coach ended that dream too. His knees were gone, his pace was fading, and suddenly, the gentle giant looked very human. Charles came home to Wales and signed for Cardiff City, where he played alongside his brother Mel. It was a nice touch, but everyone knew this was the end. He retired from league football in 1966, age 35. He kept playing at lower levels until he was 42, managing teams like Hereford United and Merthyr Tydfil, but the magic was gone. Football had made Charles famous, but it hadn't made him rich. Not like today's players. When he retired, he needed to make a living. So he tried business, a restaurant in Turin and a sports shop in Cardiff. Both failed completely. The restaurant failure hit him hard financially. The sports shop going under made things worse. Then in 1982, his marriage fell apart. The divorce settlement was another massive blow to his finances. The man who had been earning world record transfer fees was now struggling to pay his bills. This is where Charles's story gets really sad. He'd given everything to football, his body, his prime years, his health, but football hadn't looked after him in return. There were no massive pension schemes back then, no image rights deals, no endorsement contracts. When you stopped playing, the money stopped too. Charles tried to stay positive. He'd always been a gentleman, never complained publicly, never blamed anyone else for his problems. But privately, the stress was building. The financial pressure was constant. And there was something else happening that nobody talked about at the time. Charles had been a smoker his whole life. Back in the 1950s and 60s, everyone smoked, players, managers, fans. Nobody knew how dangerous it was. Nobody warned you about cancer or heart disease. You just smoking caught up with him. Charles had his first heart attack at 62. He survived, but it was a warning. Then in 1997 came worse news, bladder cancer. The man who had never been seriously injured playing football was now fighting for his life. The cancer treatment was brutal. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. Charles went through it all. But he was tough. He'd always been tough. He fought the cancer and won, at least for a while. But something else was happening. Charles was starting to forget things. Little things at first. Names, dates, where he'd put his keys. Then bigger things. His family noticed he was getting confused more often. The diagnosis was devastating. Alzheimer's disease. January 2004 started like any other month for Charles. He was scheduled to do a television interview in Italy about his playing days. It should have been a nice trip down memory lane. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Just before the interview, Charles had another heart attack. This one was massive. He collapsed and was rushed to hospital in Italy. The damage was severe. His circulation was failing. Blood wasn't getting to his extremities properly. Within days, gangrene set in. Charles's foot was dying. The doctors had no choice. They had to amputate part of it to save his life. The gentle giant, who had used his feet to score goals across Europe, now had one foot partially cut off. But here's where the story gets beautiful, even in tragedy. Juventus, the club he'd played for 40 years earlier, heard what was happening. They didn't hesitate. They sent an air ambulance complete with doctors and nurses to bring Charles home to Britain. They paid for everything, the flight, the medical team, the whole operation. Think about that. A football club spending tens of thousands of pounds to help a former player they hadn't employed for decades. That tells you everything about how much respect Charles had earned. Even in his darkest hour, people remembered what kind of man he was. Charles was taken to Pinderfields Hospital in Wakefield, West Yorkshire. His family gathered around him. The Alzheimer's meant he wasn't always sure where he was or who was visiting. The cancer was spreading again. His heart was failing. Multiple diseases were attacking him at once. On February 21st, 2004, in the early hours of the morning, William John Charles died. He was 72 years old. The cause wasn't just one thing, it was everything together. Heart failure, cancer complications, circulation problems from the amputation, and the slow destruction of Alzheimer's. The man who had never been sent off in his entire career had finally been defeated. Not by another player, not by injury, but by time and disease, and the simple fact that even giants truly tragic. Not how he died, but how he was forgotten while he was dying. Football moved on, new stars emerged. The game became about money and marketing and social media followers. Charles belonged to a different era, when players shook hands after matches, when getting booked was shameful, when football was played for love, not just money. When Juventus observed a minute's silence for Charles, it turned into applause. That's his real legacy. Not the trophies or the records, but the respect he earned by doing things the right way. The gentle giant may have had a tragic ending, but his life was anything but tragic.